Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Amar Javed. I hope I'm audible to all of you. And I'm currently posted in Islamabad. I'm working as Assistant Director Investigation uh, in one of the law enforcement agencies. Uh, and I hope that should do as far as the introduction is concerned. I hope all of you are doing well. It is a current affairs and IR lecture. We are going to talk about nuclear issues. I'll tell you what we're going to cover briefly. Basically, it's a two lecture series because, as far as nuclear issues are concerned, it seems to be just one topic, but then there is a lot of concepts and ideas and problems that we have to look into. I'll give you a brief rundown on what we are going to cover. Okay. Um, Starting with the basic concepts. Today, we'll start our lecture with the basic concepts. We'll be talking about the concept of deterrence, and then we'll be talking about the concept of nuclear deterrence, mutually assured destruction, the doctrine. Then we are going to talk about balance of power and anarchy. These are some of the basic concepts. And then we're going to look into the history of proliferation, what it means when we use the word proliferation. Um, and we're going to talk about how Pakistan and India came to develop their nuclear bombs. Uh, and then in the next lecture, we'll be touching down some other things. All right. But first things first, before we embark on studying what nuclear proliferation and nuclear issues are, you need to have a fair understanding कि question किन grounds पे आता है. All right. So the likelihood of the question that you may expect in the exam would be either, I'll let me write it down for all of you. Okay. And then we'll discuss, ताकि आप क्वेश्चन को जहन में रखें तो आपके लिए पढ़ना ज़्यादा आसान होगा, right? So the question that you may expect in the exam is based on the nuclear politics, which also includes nuclear politics of South Asia. All right. The the other question that you may expect in the exam is about concerns of international community over Pakistan's nuclear assets. Another question that you may expect in the exam is the failure of non-proliferation regime. And then there is another question which is one of the most heated debates as far as the contemporary affairs is concerned, and it's about Pakistan India nuclear standoff. So these are some of the dynamics of this whole problem of nuclear issues. And keeping that in mind, we would cover these questions, and we'll try to make sure that if the question comes from any of these angles, you're able to attempt it, not just able to attempt it, but able to score well as well. Okay. That being said, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to cover the overall concept of a nuclear bomb, that how it works, how it has come to develop or evolve with the passage of time. We all know that the the first and so far the only nuclear bomb which was used, it was in World War II. That was on August 6th and August 9th on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively, uh, by the USA. And since then, there has been a race of WMDs. When I say WMDs, it means we are talking about weapons of mass destruction. All right. What are weapons of mass destruction? Uh, it's pretty much self-explanatory. The word itself explains the whole concept. So any military weapon, any military device that is used to kill or annihilate or destroy the large population, nuclear weapons also fall within the category of weapons of mass destruction, and they happen to be the most lethal of all as far as the weapons of mass destruction is concerned. But then there are other weapons as well. When we talk about weapons of mass destruction, that includes the biochemical weapons. For instance, the gases which have been used previously uh, in different wars by different countries, and in some cases even the countries use them against their own population. For instance, Syria used the chemical gas on one of its cities, and thousands of people were killed. Because focus is more on the nuclear weapons as a whole when we just going to talk about in this no, the gas chambers of World War II were different. I'll come down to that as well. That being said, what I'm going to do is to put things in perspective. I'm going to play a video for you. It's a short video, but I find it very helpful when we have to make someone understand the importance of nuclear weapons and how destructive they could be. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to play a video for you all, and you have to watch it carefully, and then we'll start with the formal lecture. Okay.
August 6th, 1945, the Hiroshima nuclear explosion. Since these World War II attacks, nuclear weapons have become even more powerful. The Hiroshima bomb produced an explosion of 15 kilotons. 1 kiloton equals the explosive power of 1,000 tons of TNT. If it was detonated in New York City's Times Square, this is what it would look like. The radius of the affected area would be almost a mile long. This yellow circle indicates the radius of the explosion's fireball. Within the red circle, fatalities are near 100%, and all concrete structures are damaged or demolished. Within the gray circle, most residential structures are destroyed, and there are massive injuries and fatalities. The orange circle indicates the area in which third-degree radiation burns occur. But the sheer destructive power of that explosion pales in comparison to the largest thermonuclear weapon currently in the United States arsenal, the B-80. Created in the late 1970s, the B-83 can produce an explosion of up to 1,200 kilotons, which is 80 times the Hiroshima explosion. That's the explosive power of 1.2 million tons of TNT. If dropped on New York City, the radius of the affected area would be over 7 miles. Then, there's the 1954 Operation Castle Bravo, the largest nuclear bomb ever tested by the United States. It produced a 15,000 kiloton explosion, which is over 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. If detonated in New York City, the radius of the affected area would be over 21 miles. But there's even one more powerful than that. On October 30th, 1961, the Soviet Union tested the Tsar Bomba. It is the most powerful weapon ever detonated. It produced a 50,000 kiloton explosion. That's 3,300 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The mushroom cloud was so tall that it dwarfed anything on Earth. If dropped on New York City, the radius of the affected area would be over 31 miles. The Tsar Bomba was created over 5 decades ago. Today, there are an estimated 14,900 nuclear weapons in the world. If not for the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, we might have even more powerful bombs today.
All right. Um, were you able to watch and hear what the video said? I can read some of you were not able to hear the audio, but then there were, subtitles to it, so you could read it. Why I showed this video so you could see that why nuclear issues are so important, because they're posing existential threat. What is an existential threat? That threatens the existence of humanity. So we can see that. Let me write this word for you: existential threat. So existence. When we say existential threat, it means we are talking about a threat that poses threat to the existence of anything. So, the nuclear physicists are of the opinion that the bombs which were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, um, they are like firecrackers to the bombs that have been developed since then. And I'll tell you what they did when these bombs were dropped on these two cities. Immediately, they killed around in case of Hiroshima, some 170,000 people died instantly. In case of Nagasaki, it's estimated that 80,000 to 100,000 people perished from the face of Earth. All right. So this kind of explains the whole concept. And if they are firecrackers compared to modern bombs, and if a firecracker is able to inflict such kind of damage, then imagine what the nuclear bombs of modern age could do. And then since then, we have come to accumulate around 14,900 such bombs. All right. So this should be enough for you to understand why this nuclear proliferation and nuclear issues, nuclear armed race uh, is of importance when we talk about global politics, global peace and security, and therefore it is very essential for all of us to understand all of these concepts. All right. Now, that being said, I'll take you to some of the basic concepts, starting with one such thing, and we call it deterrence. First, we'll talk about deterrence, and then we're going to talk about nuclear deterrence. All right. So, when we say the word deterrence, what does it mean? Deterrence is basically an ability to stop someone. In the most simplest of the ways, by the word deterrence, we mean the ability to stop. The idea of deterrence in military strategy is concerned, um, the word deterrence may be something new which is being used in global politics today, but as a military strategy, deterrence predates any of these modern concepts. It has existed since the earliest of the human societies, and as a military strategy, Greek cities were the first ones to use the concept of deterrence. All right. So we are basically now talking about some 300 to 400 years BC, which is a pretty long time. So deterrence has always been there as a military strategy. उस जमाने में जो deterrence होती थी, it used to be achieved through fortification. If you happen to have watched Hollywood movies, historical fictions, and I can recall one such movie, and that is called The Kingdom of Heaven. Let me write it for you. It's an amazing movie. If any of you happen to get a chance, Please do watch it. It's basically it's a story about I'm sorry, excuse me. It's a story about how Saladin Ayyubi came to capture Jerusalem. तो उस जमाने में होता क्या था? फोर्टिफिकेशन से मुराद ये है कि they used to build defenses around the forts. They used to fortify. वॉल्स स्ट्रॉन्ग की जाती थी, डिफरेंट मैकेनिज्म्स अडॉप्ट किए जाते थे, आर्चर्स को प्लेस करते थे अराउंड द वॉल्स ऑफ द फोर्ट, ताकि कोई अगर एनिमी अप्रोच कर रहा हो तो वो आर्चर्स जो हैं दे शुड बी एबल टू टेक दैट एनिमी डाउन. सिमिलरली वो वहाँ से फिर अगर और क्लोज आता था तो वो दे यूज्ड टू हैव दैट बर्निंग ऑयल poured from the top of the fort. सो ये वो सारी स्ट्रैटेजीज थी जिनको वो यूज करते थे एज ए डेटरेंस. इससे होता क्या था, जो आर्मीज एनिमीज की अप्रोच कर रही होती थी टुवर्ड्स एनी फोर्ट, जब वो देखते थे कि फोर्ट बड़ा स्ट्रांग है तो वो रुक जाते थे अटैक करने से. दैट्स द होल कॉन्सेप्ट, यू नो. when the enemy is deterred, it means your ability as a state, as a country, if that stops your enemy from attacking you, then you've achieved deterrence. That's the whole idea. I hope it's clear to you now as far as the word deterrence is concerned. Good. Now we'll talk about nuclear deterrence. That the same military strategy is used when countries develop nuclear weapons, because they think, or it is being believed, that if a country happens to possess nuclear weapon, the other state will not be able to attack it, because they know that the country is in possession of nuclear weapons, or a country is a nuclear armed state, and therefore, if they attack that country, the country might retaliate by attacking them with one of its nuclear devices. And since the destruction of a nuclear bomb is so terrible that the attacking state would be deterred by this whole idea. So, a lot of countries, for instance, when we talk about Pakistan, and when we talk about USSR, why they came to develop nuclear bombs, we'll discuss it in great details. But for now, just for the sake of reference and to elaborate it further, one of the reasons that countries able to, or they've acquired nuclear weapons since the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, is because they wanted to achieve, or they wanted to attain nuclear deterrence. All right. Is that clear? Now we're going to talk about very important concept, and you have to have a good understanding of it. It's called anarchy. Uh, for that, I'm going to use a whiteboard to explain it to you. The circle basically indicates, an international system, and this is one country, or a state, as you may call it. This is another. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to populate this international system with some countries. All right. So this A, B, C, D, this basically, represents different countries or different states, as you may call them. Uh, were you all able to see it? What I just drew on the whiteboard? Good, good, good. So bear with me, my drawing may not be very well, but I'll try to explain the whole concept by drawing this. All right. So getting back to the whiteboard. Let me. All right. So basically, ये जो largest circle है जिसको आप देख रहे हो, this represents an international system. And within this circle, these small four circles represent four different states. All right. Now, I'm going to draw a small check here. It's a box which basically represents power. पावर क्या होती है? पावर बेसिकली ये होती है कि when an able sorry a state is able to influence the other states due to its capability. It could be soft power or it could be hard power. Military power होती है, which is achieved in the form of having more forces, more soldiers, more weapons. And then there is other form of power. It could be economic power, it could be technological power, or it could be a combination of both. All right. So this X, which I've drawn on top of state A, represents that state A is acquiring more power. So this is to show that the state has more power. But before we do that, let me tell you what do we mean by the word anarchy. It's basically a concept of IR, but then you have to have a good understanding as well from the current affairs point of view. Anarchy का मतलब है absence of central authority. That's what it means. So ये जो रियलिस्ट हैं, जो इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस का स्कूल ऑफ थॉट है, वो ये बिलीव करते हैं कि जो इंटरनेशनल सिस्टम है हमारा, it is as such कि it is anarchic in nature. And by anarchic what they mean is कि यहाँ पे कोई सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट या सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी नहीं है जो एक स्टेट को दूसरे स्टेट के अगेंस्ट कुछ भी करने से रोक सके. ऑलराइट, सो दैट्स द होल आइडिया. और फिर वो ये भी कहते हैं कि कोई सेंट्रल फोर्स नहीं है, कोई पुलिस नहीं है. जैसे कंट्रीज के अंदर तो लॉ भी होता है, गवर्नमेंट भी होती है जो कि इश्यूज रिजॉल्व करती है, और फिर लॉ एनफोर्समेंट एजेंसीज भी होती हैं जो लॉ को इन्फोर्स कर रही होती है. बट इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी में अकॉर्डिंग टू रियलिस्ट्स देयर इज नो सच थिंग. तो उससे हुआ क्या? उससे हुआ ये है कि they use a term which is called a self help system. Let me just write it for you. uh, they say that international system is basically anarchic in nature. And anarchic, I've already explained, it means the absence of central authority. All right. उससे हुआ क्या है? It has become a self help system. ठीक है. What is a self help system? A self help system is where every state is for itself. And primarily what states are doing, states are ensuring their safety and survival. Safety and survival. All right. तो एक ऐसा सिस्टम जिसमें कोई सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट नहीं है, कोई सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी नहीं है जो एक स्टेट को दूसरी स्टेट के अगेंस्ट कोई एग्रेसिव एक्ट करने से रोक सके. तो फिर ऐसे सिस्टम में क्या होता है कि स्टेट्स दे आर कॉन्शियसली एंड कंसिस्टेंटली ट्राइंग वन थिंग, and that is to ensure their survival. And they know that nobody is going to come to their help, therefore they have to ensure survival on their own. All right. So that's the idea. अब होता क्या है? If one state happens to acquire more power, that creates a sense of insecurity among other states. But आपको ये पता है कि इंटरनेशनल सिस्टम में हर स्टेट जो है वो इक्वल कैपेबिलिटी नहीं रखती. There are powerful states, there are less powerful states, and then there are smaller states. So जब एक स्टेट पावर एक्वायर करती है तो दूसरी स्टेट को ये लगता है कि इसने ये पावर शायद इसलिए एक्वायर की है कि इट माइट वांट टू अटैक द अदर स्टेट. तो उस स्टेट ने अपना सर्वाइवल इंश्योर करना है और उससे पता है कि नोबडी इज गोइंग टू कम टू हेल्प. सो देयरफॉर वो स्टेट क्या करती है? वो भी वही पावर एक्वायर करने की कोशिश करती है, अगर तो उसके पास कैपेबिलिटीज है. अगर कैपेबिलिटीज नहीं है तो वो किसी और स्टेट के साथ अलायंस करती है जिसके पास वो पावर होती है, ठीक है। जो पिछली स्टेट होती है जिसने वो पावर एक्वायर की हुई होती है, वो देखती है कि अच्छा यही पावर तो उसने भी एक्वायर कर ली, तो हो सकता है कल को ये अटैक कर दे, ये शायद उससे ज्यादा पावर एक्वायर कर ली। तो उसके अंदर फिर वो सेंस ऑफ इनसिक्योरिटी आ जाती है और वो उस पावर को मल्टीप्लाई करने की कोशिश करती है। एंड दिस गोज ऑन एंड ऑन एंड ऑन। और इसको वो नाम देते हैं, इस फिनोमेना को, दे कॉल इट सिक्योरिटी डायलेमा। This is another concept. What is a security dilemma? In which states are continuously trying to secure themselves, and in their effort, they create a sense of insecurity among the other states. And those states retaliate by doing the same, and that is to secure themselves from the other states. So they term it security dilemma. All right. अभी कुछ लोगों ने यहाँ पे लिखा है कि जी ये आईआर के कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं। जी नहीं, आईआर के कॉन्सेप्ट्स नहीं है। अगर आप करंट अफेयर्स में मार्क्स लेना चाहते हैं तो ये आपको चीज़ें पता होनी चाहिए, ठीक है। इट्स जस्ट नॉट अबाउट आईआर, इट इज इक्वली इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर करंट अफेयर्स एस्पिरेंट टू हैव अ गुड अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ इट। और आप आगे चल के देखेंगे कि ये कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं, दे विल बी frequently used when we'll be discussing about the analysis, and when I'll try to help you build your perspective on things. All right. Getting back to what I was trying to explain you. So this idea of one state acquiring power, creating insecurity in the other state. Let me explain you with the help of the diagram that I had just drew. All right. All right. So you see, if state A happens to acquire this power, this creates insecurity among these states. All right. So what state B does, it also tries to acquire the same power. All right. Because state B feels threatened from state A acquiring this power. Why? Because this whole system is anarchic in nature. Now, imagine that state C may not have the resources to develop the same weapon or to attain same power. So what state B and C could do, they could, you know, enter into an alliance. State C might seek to have alliance with state B, because under this alliance, state C would feel equally secure as state B is. Now, state A and state D might also want to develop an alliance, because once these two states are into alliance, state A and state D might also feel threatened. And this is this continuous, attaining of power, as a result of which the sense of insecurity which is developed in the other states, and to kill that sense of security, they also try to acquire the same power, or they get into an alliance. That's the idea that explains security dilemma, that states are continuously feeling threatened, feeling insecure because of the other states acquiring more power, and in order to respond to that, they also try to either acquire the power or enter into alliances. So this whole situation, which goes on and it's still going on, is, excuse me, termed as security dilemma. All right. Great. और इससे आपको एक चीज और भी समझ में आएगी, जो आपकी जितनी भी ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स है, अगर आप इसकी हिस्ट्री उठा के देख लें, तो आपको पूरी जो हिस्ट्री है ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स की और इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी की या इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस की या इंटरनेशनल सिस्टम की, उसमें आपको यही चीज नजर आएगी. There will be a shifting of alliances. There will be states acquiring new weapons, and as a result of which, the other states would do the same. And this also explains um, कि why there is an arms race. देखें, न्यूक्लियर आर्मामेंट क्या है? इट इज लार्जली पार्ट ऑफ आर्म्स रेस. आर्म्स रेस क्या है? Where countries get into a race of acquiring more and more arms, whether it's a nuclear bomb or it's weapons of mass destruction or any other weapon. Because if one state acquires one military technology, others start feeling insecure. They think that this state has become more powerful compared to the other states. So, in response to that, in retaliation to that, they tend to acquire either the same technology or they tend to form alliances with those states who have already acquired that technology, or they tend to acquire more advanced technology. So they could, make sure that the state who had acquired that technology is in no way is able to dominate them. Okay, and then this insecurity shifts from these states to the previous state. That state tries to do the same, and this goes on and on and on, and then the world or the region where this thing is happening enters into an arms race. And this explains why there are wars that have been fought, why countries have happened to enter into arms race, why there is so much increasingly spending on defense going on around the world, why states continue to develop new and more modernized and sophisticated military technologies and military systems. It's because of this security dilemma. Coming back to another very important concept, and it's called balance of power. This is also very important for you to. अच्छा, एक चीज मैं आपको यहाँ पे बताऊं कि ये anarchy, security dilemma and balance of power, they basically explain state behavior. कि अगर states जो हैं, and when I'm using the word state, आई एम रेफरिंग टू कंट्रीज। तो आप करंट अफेयर्स में या आईआर में कंट्री का टर्म यूज नहीं करते, हम स्टेट का वर्ड यूज करते हैं। इट्स अ मोर अप्रोप्रिएट वे ऑफ डिफाइनिंग अ कंट्री। तो अब इसी तरह से अनदर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट इज बैलेंस ऑफ पावर। लेट मी राइट इट फॉर यू। आई थिंक आई सेंट मैसेज टू वन पर्सन, लेट मी सेंड इट टू एवरीवन। बैलेंस ऑफ पावर क्या है? अगर आप में से किसी ने फिजिक्स पढ़ी हो तो वहां पे एक कॉन्सेप्ट है जिसको हम कहते हैं इक्विलिब्रियम। इक्विलिब्रियम क्या होता है? आपने सीसॉ देखा? आई एम श्योर आप सब ने सीसॉ देखा होगा। तो सीसॉ क्या होता है? वो एक वेज पे टिका होता है, दोनों साइड पे बैलेंस जब इक्वल होता है तो सीसॉ एक इक्विलिब्रियम स्टेट में होता है। अगर आप एक साइड पे वेट ज्यादा रख देंगे तो वो उस साइड पे बैठ जाएगा, तो वो सीसॉ फिर इस तरह से इस तरह हो जाएगा। तो आप उसको दोबारा बैलेंस करने के लिए इस वाली साइड पे भी उतना ही वेट रखना पड़ेगा। एंड दिस इज हाउ a seesaw is hinging on a very fine balance. All right. All right. बैलेंस ऑफ पावर क्या कहता है? बैलेंस ऑफ पावर ये कहता है कि स्टेट्स act to preserve that balance of power. Let me write it for you first and then I'll elaborate. Concept. Remember that international system I drew for you? तो उसमें क्या था? एक स्टेट जब ज्यादा पावर एक्वायर करती है तो बाकी जो वहां पे बैलेंस ऑफ पावर एक डेवलप हुआ होता है वो डिस्टर्ब हो जाता है। तो बैलेंस ऑफ पावर का मतलब ही ये है। पहले तो आप बैलेंस ऑफ पावर को समझिए, इसका मतलब क्या है? इट इज लाइक अ सीसॉ जिसमें दोनों प्लैंक्स जो हैं वो एक फाइन बैलेंस पे टिके हुए। तो इंटरनेशनल सिस्टम में भी ये इमेजिन किया जाता है कि जब स्टेट्स हैं दे हैव अचीव्ड अ सेंस ऑफ बैलेंस ऑफ पावर। इट मींस कि हर स्टेट के पास इक्वल पावर है या वो इन अलायंस है विद दैट स्टेट जिसके पास वो पावर है, ताकि कोई भी स्टेट दूसरी स्टेट के ऊपर डोमिनेट ना कर सके। अब ऐसी कंडीशन में व्हेन वन स्टेट टेंड्स टू एक्वायर मोर पावर, तो वो बैलेंस ऑफ पावर जो है वो डिस्टर्ब हो जाता है। तो अदर स्टेट्स हैव टू एक्ट to restore that balance of power because they do not want that state to dominate the other state. That is the idea of balance of power. ठीक है? तो अगर एक स्टेट कोई नई मिलिट्री टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलप करती है, या नए वेपन्स एक्वायर करती है, नए प्लेन्स एक्वायर करती है, तो उससे क्या होता है, उससे जो वो एक बैलेंस बना हुआ होता है बिटवीन द स्टेट्स, वो डिस्टरप्ट हो जाता है, वो इम्बैलेंस में चला जाता है। वो स्टेट ज़्यादा पावर एक्वायर कर लेती है और उसके अंदर ये कैपेबिलिटी आ जाती है कि वो बाकी सारी स्टेट्स को डोमिनेट करे या उन्हें कंट्रोल करने की कोशिश करे। वो एक्ट करती हैं टू रिस्टोर द बैलेंस बाय एक्वायरिंग द सेम टेक्नोलॉजी और द सेम वेपन, राइट? That's the idea of balance of power. Okay. That being said, I want to explain another very important concept, and then we'll talk about nuclear proliferation. It is called MAD. Do you know what MAD means? एक तो MAD वो है जो हम नॉर्मल सेंस में यूज करते हैं। मैड बाय मैड मीन्स वी टॉक अबाउट पीपल हु आर इनसेन और वो गॉन नट्स, जिसको हम उर्दू में पागल कहते हैं। बट यहाँ पे मैड का क्या मतलब है? मैड का मतलब है म्यूचुअली assured, let me write it for you, destruction, mutually assured destruction। ये कैसे होती है? This is very important concept, and it's very closely linked with the idea of nuclearization and nuclear arms race and nuclear deterrence। म्यूचुअली assured destruction कैसे होती है? इसका मतलब ये है when two states have acquired power to a point that they can destroy each other completely, then we call it MAD, which is mutually assured destruction। यानी दोनों स्टेट्स के पास इतनी मिलिट्री पावर या सॉफ्ट या इकोनॉमिक पावर या टेक्नोलॉजिकल पावर होती है कि वो दोनों एक दूसरे को डिस्ट्रॉय करें कर सकती हो completely। Then they enter into another doctrine which we call mutually assured destruction। इसमें हमारे पास दो एग्जाम्पल्स हैं। एक तो कोल्ड वॉर की है, अभी हम जब डिस्कस करेंगे तो आपको ज्यादा समझ में आएगा, और दूसरी हमारे पास पाकिस्तान और इंडिया की। बट आई स्टार्ट विद कोल्ड वॉर क्योंकि वहां पे ये वर्चुअली हुआ है, ठीक है? तो आई फॉर दैट, क्योंकि अभी व्हाइट बोर्ड काम नहीं कर रहा फॉर सम स्टूपिड रीजन, आई डोंट नो व्हाट इट इज, आई हैव ड्रॉन समथिंग फॉर यू, क्योंकि ये थोड़ा सा जरा बोर्ड पे बनाना मुश्किल होता है। आई एम नॉट वेरी गुड विद ड्राइंग, सो आई ट्राई टू ड्रॉ इट। I'll show you. If you could see, is it visible to everyone? पहले मुझे ये बता दो, सबको नजर आ रहा है? Can you see this? All right, then I'll explain it to you one by one. Okay? कि what does it mean? मैंने यहाँ पे दो, अगर आप देखें, दो rectangles बने हुए, they represent two states. Okay? It is state A and then you have state B. All right? मैं इसको और थोड़ा सा बेहतर करने की कोशिश करता हूँ। ओके, तो स्टेट ए और स्टेट बी, आप इनको पाकिस्तान और इंडिया भी कह सकते हैं, यूएसए और यूएसएसआर भी कह सकते हैं जो कोल्ड वॉर के दिनों में थे, या फिर आप इनको जनरल दो स्टेट्स कंसिडर कर सकते हैं। अब हुआ क्या ड्यूरिंग कोल्ड वॉर? सबसे पहले अमेरिका ने न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब एक्वायर किया, और उसके बाद जो रशिया था, सोवियत रशिया, उसने भी न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब एक्वायर कर लिया। ओके, इनिशियली जो न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब को कैरी करने की कैपेसिटी थी वो प्लेन्स में थी। प्लेन्स यूज्ड टू कैरी द बॉम्ब फ्रॉम वन डेस्टिनेशन टू अनदर। तो जब यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ने वो प्लेन्स डेवलप कर लिए जो कि न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब कैरी कर सकते, तो रशिया ने भी डेवलप कर लिए। फिर जो जो टेक्नोलॉजी एडवांस हुई तो यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ने, ये अगर आप देखें यहाँ पे आपको नजर आ रहा होगा, ये दो पॉइंटी सी चीजें हैं, दे शो यू दीज आर मिसाइल्स। फिर मिसाइल्स आ गए जो कि प्लेन्स की जगह न्यूक्लियर वॉरहेड्स कैरी करते थे। जब यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ने डेवलप किए तो रशिया ने भी डेवलप कर लिए। फिर इसके बाद अगर आप नीचे देखें तो आपको ये सबमरीन्स नजर आएंगी, इनको हम SLBMs कहते हैं, सबमरीन लॉन्च्ड बैलिस्टिक मिसाइल्स। फिर जो जो टेक्नोलॉजी एडवांस हुई तो SLBMs आ गई, वो यूएसएसआर ने भी एक्वायर करी। अब सिनेरियो क्या था? सिनेरियो ये था कि अगर यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स अपने वॉर प्लेन्स को भेजेगा टू अटैक यूएसएसआर, यूएसएसआर कुड डू द सेम। अगर यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स मिसाइल लॉन्च करेगा तो उसके पास भी कैपेबिलिटी थी मिसाइल लॉन्च करने की। अगर वो सबमरीन के थ्रू करेंगे तो यूएसएसआर के पास भी वही कैपेबिलिटी। सो इस सिचुएशन में both the states had acquired the same technology to destroy each other, and that is mutually assured destruction. We call it MAD. Is that clear? सबको नजर आया? गुड। तो ये एक और डॉक्ट्राइन है जो कि ये बताती है कि अगर आपके पास न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स हैं तो उससे होता क्या है, उसके बाद आप उसको एडवांस करते हैं। दिस इज अनदर फॉर्म ऑफ प्रोलिफरेशन। अभी हम प्रोलिफरेशन को देखेंगे तो आपको पता लगेगा कि प्रोलिफरेशन दो तरह की होती है, एक वर्टिकल होती है, एक हॉरिजॉन्टल होती है। ऑलराइट, गुड। सो जब दोनों कंट्रीज कॉन्टिन्यूसली न्यू और मॉडर्न टेक्नोलॉजीज एक्वायर कर रही होती हैं और दोनों के पास एक जैसी कैपेबिलिटीज होती हैं, तो फिर उनको पता होता है कि अगर इस कंट्री ने इसको अटैक किया या इसने इसको अटैक किया तो दोनों में इतनी कैपेबिलिटी है कि वो एक दूसरे को कंप्लीटली डिस्ट्रॉय कर सकती हैं। दिस इज कॉल्ड म्यूचुअली अश्योर्ड डिस्ट्रक्शन। ठीक है, विच इज प्रीटी सिमिलर टू न्यूक्लियर डेटरेंस, बट ये हम इसमें एक कॉन्सेप्ट नया, अभी मैं उसको टच नहीं करना चाह रहा, विच इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ वर्टिकल प्रोलिफरेशन। जब हम उस पे आएंगे तो हम उसकी बात करेंगे। अब थोड़ा सा जरा हम हिस्ट्री पे आते हैं कि न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब कैसे स्टार्ट हुआ। सो आई टेक यू बैक टू वर्ल्ड वॉर टू। वर्ल्ड वॉर टू आपको पता है कि देयर वर टू अपोजिंग अलायंसेस। एक को तो हम कहते ही एलाइज थे, ठीक है, और दूसरी एक तरफ हमारे पास जो था वो आपको पता है, ये एलाइज में जो थे दे वर ब्रिटेन, फ्रांस, United States of America, and then you had USSR. On the other hand, you had Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan primarily. तो वर्ल्ड वॉर टू में हो क्या रहा था? एट द पीक ऑफ वर्ल्ड वॉर टू, अराउंड 1942, अमेरिकन इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसीज को ये पता लगा कि नाजी जर्मनी जो है, दे वर सीक्रेटली डेवलपिंग अ न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब। अच्छा, इससे पहले थ्योरेटिकली ये कॉन्सेप्ट एग्जिस्ट करता था कि आप एक इस तरह का बॉम्ब बना सकते हैं, फिजन रिएक्शन जनरेट कर सकते हैं जो एक इनॉर्मस अमाउंट ऑफ एनर्जी रिलीज करेगा। ठीक है, 1942 जब वर्ल्ड वॉर शुरू हुई, इट वाज बैक इन 1939 सितंबर 1 को जर्मनी अटैक्ड पोलैंड, and as a result there was a war which was waged between two sides and virtually it engulfed the whole world. But by 1942 Germany had started, you know, sort of losing the war, and they were resorting to more tactics, and that's where American intelligence agencies, they learned that Germany was secretly developing a nuclear bomb. तो उस वक्त जो अमेरिकन साइंटिस्ट थे, दे रोट अ लेटर टू द अमेरिकन प्रेसिडेंट रूजवेल्ट, उनका नाम था, और उन्होंने कहा कि जी इससे पहले कि जर्मनी ये बॉम्ब बनाए, वी शुड बी एबल टू डेवलप दिस बॉम्ब। सो थ्योरेटिकली तो ये थ्योरी एग्जिस्ट करती थी कि आप एक ऐसा बॉम्ब बना सकते हैं जिससे एक इनॉर्मस अमाउंट की एनर्जी रिलीज होगी यूजिंग द फिजन रिएक्शन। न्यूक्लियर रिएक्शंस दो तरह के होते हैं, एक फ्यूजन रिएक्शन होता है और एक फिजन रिएक्शन होता है। फिजन रिएक्शन में क्या होता है कि जो लार्जर न्यूक्लियाई है, इट गेट्स divided into smaller nuclei by bombardment of external source of energy, and this creates a sort of chain reaction, and every time it gets divided into more particles, it releases energy, and that energy becomes the source of destruction of bomb. So that being said, American president commissioned a project जिसमें उन्होंने 3 different cities के American cities के अंदर उन्होंने they hired hundreds of nuclear physicists, mathematicians and other technologists and innovators कि वो ये bomb develop कर सकें, and that project came to be known as Manhattan Project. मैनहट्टन एक एरिया है न्यूयॉर्क के पास, but like I said, there were 2 other places, like Alamos, and there was one more city. Anyways, so within the span of 2.5 years, they came up with this nuclear bomb. और जो पहला nuclear test explosion हुआ था, उसका नाम था Eternity. ठीक है। अब वर्ल्ड वॉर टू में जर्मनी बाय द एंड ऑफ इट, एंड बाय एंड आई मीन्स in 1945, Germany had almost surrendered, and the world could see that the war was coming to an end. But Japan का मामला थोड़ा different था. They were not ready to surrender. ठीक है, and they were continue to fight. They were continuously fighting with the Allied forces. तो उसको finally it was decided by the American troops will drop a bomb on one of the cities of Japan to force them to surrender. And on August 6th, they used the first bomb, which is called Little Boy, on Hiroshima. Okay. Then August 9th, they used another bomb, which is called Fat Man. And the plane that carried these bombs, it is called Enola Gay. ये आपको इसलिए बता रहा हूँ कि ये आपके MCQs के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इम्पोर्टेंट है. So the reason that ray, which is being given by the United States of America, why did they bomb these two cities, is because Japan was not ready to surrender, and somehow they had to force it to surrender. Or consequently, we've seen that as a result of which Japan surrendered, and eventually World War II came to an end. But America's bombing of these two cities, and then the beginning of another war, which we call the Cold War, started a new age, and that age is called the Age of Armament. Age of Armament. Let me write it for you. And that also include nuclear armament. ये आपको इसलिए पता होना जरूरी है कि जब हम न्यूक्लियर प्रोलिफरेशन की बात करते हैं तो उसमें जो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्टर है which helped the development of these 14,900 nuclear bombs that we have today is the era of Cold War, which spans around 4 decades. It started right after World War II, and it ended with the dismantling of USSR in late 1980s and in the early 1990s. And in this whole period, America and USSR, they locked their horns over achieving nuclear dominance. And for that, they continued to stockpile more and more nuclear warheads and nuclear weapon, and that created a sort of a race due to which other countries tend to acquire the nuclear weapons. ठीक है, तो जब ये मैनहट्टन प्रोजेक्ट चल रहा था, डिस्पाइट द फैक्ट कि रशिया वाज द एलाई ऑफ अमेरिका, बट इट वाज केप्ट इन डार्क. इट वाज मोर ऑफ अ सीक्रेट प्रोजेक्ट जिस पे यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ने काम किया. अब जो फाइल्स डी क्लासिफाइड हुई हैं उनसे ये पता लगा है कि यूके और फ्रांस को they had taken them into confidence. उनको उन्होंने बताया था. But apart from that, others were kept in dark, particularly USSR. तो जब उन्होंने जापान को बॉम्ब करना था तो उससे कोई 2 हफ्ता पहले they called a meeting of allies, और जहाँ पे जापान के USSR को ये डिस्क्लोज किया गया कि America had secretly developed a nuclear weapon which could change the course of the war, and then they use it. और उसके right after that, there was another war which started between the former allies, USSR and USA, and then they became the foes, means they became the enemies during this whole period. तो USSR में एक sense of insecurity develop हो गई, because उस वक्त जो international order था, it was as such कि the world was divided into bipoles. We call it bipolar world. Why can't I? तो उसमें हुआ क्या, यूएसएसआर में वो इनसिक्योरिटी डेवलप हो गई, और उस वक्त जो वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर था राइट आफ्टर वर्ल्ड वॉर टू, इट वाज कॉल्ड बाइपोलर वर्ल्ड. बाइपोलर से मुराद ये कि देयर वर टू superpowers. All right. So the order was bipolar. On one hand, we had the USA, which was leading the capitalist world. On the other hand, we had USSR leading the communist world. ये जो कोल्ड वॉर है और हॉट वॉर में फर्क क्या होता है? हॉट वॉर होती है जिसमें दो एनिमीज दे कन्फ्रंट each other directly, they enter into war each other with each other directly. कोल्ड वॉर जो होती है इसमें आप प्रॉक्सी वॉर्स लड़ते हैं, आइडियोलॉजिकल वॉर्स लड़ते हैं, इनडायरेक्टली एक दूसरे को अटैक करते हैं, बट आप कभी भी डायरेक्ट कन्फ्रंटेशन नहीं करते. सो ड्यूरिंग दिस होल era of Cold War, there were two ideologies which were at daggers drawn with capitalist world, which was led by USA. On the other hand, we had USSR, which was promoting the idea of communism. And they both were literally fighting tooth and nail to achieve dominance on each other. Militarily, economically, ideologically, even so much so that they entered into space race. हम अभी स्पेस के बारे में भी पढ़ेंगे कि हाउ militarization of space, वो हमारा last chapter होगा. But to put you into perspective, so whatever one side was doing, the other was trying to achieve it as well. And in fact, the whole era of this Cold War is characterized by only one thing, and that is to achieve dominance over the other. And in that pursuit of dominance, they started acquiring more and more stockpiles of nuclear weapons, and they started advancing the existing technology of nuclear weapons. Okay? So Cold War is one factor which led to this arms race. But in general, अगर हम इसकी timeline देखें, जो मैंने आपके साथ अभी शेयर भी कर दी है, कि 1945 में USA acquired it, उसके बाद कोल्ड वॉर शुरू हो जाती है राइट आफ्टर दैट. और अमेरिका को भी पता लगता है कि USSR is also pursuing nuclear ambitions. But USSR ने क्या किया कि उन्होंने they sort of deceived the American intelligence agencies. उन्होंने उनको ये बताया कि अभी टेक्नोलॉजी हमें नहीं मिली है और we might be able to acquire it somewhere in the late 1950s. So America was, not following very seriously on USSR's nuclear ambitions. But to everybody's surprise, they ended up developing nuclear bombs in 1949, which was followed by UK in 1952. 1960 में फ्रांस ने डेवलप किया, and 1964 में चाइना ने डेवलप कर लिया. फिर 1974 में हम देखते हैं कि इंडिया ने, अभी मैं उन टाइमलाइन पे नहीं जाना चाह रहा, मैं आपके सामने सिर्फ शेयर करना चाह रहा हूँ अप टिल 1964. सो ये USSR और USA के रिजल्ट में every other country also started acquiring nuclear bomb, and that led to a full-fledged nuclear arms race. but इसमें जो सबसे ज्यादा contribution थी वो ये दो ideological blocks थे. Each was trying to pit, each was trying to undermine the other, and as a result of which they kept stockpiling more and more and more nuclear stockpiles. फिर towards the end of the Cold War, जब ये नजर आ गया कि war end होने वाली थी, and USSR was could no longer afford this war and its subsequent arms race and other things. So they entered into some treaties which were aimed at reduction of nuclear warheads. But even then, वो जो reduction भी हुई है, इसके बावजूद, as we speak now, the known stockpiles of the world of nuclear stockpiles are around 14,900, and that does not include the nuclear weapons or the nuclear assets which are being developed by Israel and North Korea and of course Iran. All right, so you could see that how the Cold War led to the development and advancement and proliferation and piling up of nuclear weapons, as a result of which the world we live in right now is very insecure. One wrong incident could trigger a full-blown nuclear war. And there have been instances during Cold War where the two countries came to the verge of entering into a nuclear state. तो जब हम न्यूक्लियर प्रोलिफरेशन की बात करते हैं उसमें जो सबसे डोमिनेंट फैक्टर है, जो सबसे डिसाइसिव फैक्टर है, जिसने सबसे ज़्यादा रोल प्ले किया towards the development of and the build up of this arms race, it's the Cold War. और यहाँ पे जो पहला कॉन्सेप्ट आता है कि why USSR happened to develop the nuclear bomb, it was obviously for a simple reason. When America developed it and there were two blocks, so there was a visible imbalance of power. जिन लोगों ने कोल्ड वॉर नहीं पढ़ी हुई, मैं उनको थोड़ा सा इसका बैकड्रॉप दे देता हूँ कि वो वॉर क्यों लड़ी गई। आइडियोलॉजिकल फ्रंट पे ये वॉर लड़ी गई, बट उसकी जो मैकेनिशंस थी, दे वर नॉट लिमिटेड टू आइडियोलॉजिकल, they were military as well, and it was basically the two powers trying to um, maintain this dominance over the other, and as a result of which they engaged themselves on various fronts that included military, technological, and ideological, of course. It all ended in 1991 when USSR was dismantled and was reduced down to what we today call Russia. So initially, जो World War II के बाद post World War II order था for the whole period of Cold War, it was a bipolar order. There were two superpowers. Then the end of Cold War announced another world order जिसको हम unipolar बोलते हैं. By unipolar, we mean that there was only one sole superpower, and its name was America. All right. So initially, it was bipolar during the whole era of Cold War. Then it was unipolar, and now the world order as we know today is multipolar. What does it mean? I'll explain it to you. क्योंकि ये आपके लेक्चर का पार्ट नहीं है, but for the sake of your understanding आपको पता होना चाहिए. यूनी मल्टीपोलर से मुराद हमारा ये है कि United States continue to be a sole superpower as far as the military side of the sole superpower is concerned. But then there is a rise of new power centers, rise of China in the form of a new dominant economic power, the resurgence of Russia. So now the world order is again shifting from unipolar to multi-unipolar. America continue to dominate the military side of sole superpower, but as far as its economic might is concerned, it has been challenged by the rise of new power centers. All right. So taking you back to the Cold War, एक चीज छोटी सी मैं आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहूंगा, and then I'll share the incident. But before that, you have to understand कि हुआ क्या. जब भी कोई मिलिट्री कन्फ्रंटेशन होती है तो उसके प्रोटोकॉल्स ये होते हैं कि जो मिलिट्री कन्फ्रंटेशन हो रही होती है, तो ड्यूरिंग दैट कन्फ्रंटेशन, वेदर इट्स अ वॉर और अ स्क्रिमिश और अ स्मॉल स्केल वॉर, तो उस वॉर की जो वेजिंग होती है या वॉर लड़ने की जो परमिशन होती है, वो तो इट कम्स फ्रॉम हाईएस्ट ऑफ द कमांड्स. बट जो टैक्टिकल डिसीजंस होते हैं जब वॉर शुरू हो जाती है, then they are no longer dependent on the higher command. If a state makes its already existing nuclear weapons, nuclear technology, or nuclear system, then it's a vertical nuclear proliferation. So nuclear के जो arms हैं उनका spread दो तरह का है. एक तो ये कि एक state अपने nuclear weapons को या वो technology या उसके systems को वो transfer करे to other state, and that state acquires the same technology, then it's a horizontal nuclear proliferation. But अगर एक state अपने existing nuclear weapons को further develop करे
उसमें फर्दर एडवांसमेंट्स लेके आए, देन इट्स कॉल्ड वर्टिकल न्यूक्लियर प्रोलिफरेशन. ठीक है. As you can see in the slide as well, that's the spread of the weapons to states not currently possessing nuclear weapons, then it means it's a horizontal nuclear proliferation, increase in the number and the destructiveness of the nuclear weapons within the state already possessing them, then it's called vertical nuclear proliferation. तो क्योंकि कोल्ड वॉर में ये दोनों काम हो रहे थे, देयर वाज अ ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी. अब ये बिलीव किया जाता है कि यूएसए सीक्रेटली हेल्प्ड यूके एंड फ्रांस in the development of nuclear weapons, and so was the case with Russia doing with China, because China was the ally of Russia and UK and France were the allies of USA. So that was a horizontal nuclear proliferation. But at the same time, there was vertical nuclear proliferation going on, which was between um, which was in the form of countries acquiring more and more nuclear weapons despite already possessing them, or development of the technology which could made their already existing nuclear weapons more destructive, adding more to their effectiveness in terms of their destructive power. So this is the difference between vertical proliferation and horizontal proliferation. Is that clear, guys? Or any questions? गुड. सो उसके बाद फिर नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन एफर्ट स्टार्ट हो गई. मैंने भी आपको बताया था शुरू में कि क्वेश्चन किस तरह से आएगा. तो एक क्वेश्चन जो आप एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं एग्जाम में वो ये भी है कि व्हाई दीज नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन एफर्ट्स और द फेलियर ऑफ नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन रिजीम. क्योंकि हम देखते ये हैं कि डिस्पाइट द एफर्ट्स, world continues to add more to its nuclear piles, and the emergence of Pakistan and India as nuclear weapon states, and Iran pursuing the same, and Israel pursuing the same, also indicates that those efforts have largely not able to meet their targets. Because I told you that there were two aims to this non-proliferation regime. Number one, stopping the spread of nuclear weapons, or stopping the states from either developing more nuclear weapons or transferring the technology and the weapons to other states. And secondly, de-weaponize the states which have already acquired nuclear weapons. So the idea itself is very noble. The idea itself is very praiseworthy. But as far as the efforts are concerned, largely they've not able to met their target, or have not able to meet their not been able to meet their desired objectives. Neither the proliferation, which means the spread of weapons, has stopped, nor the states which had already acquired nuclear weapons, they haven't given up on it. They haven't relinquished their existing nuclear weapons. And why is that so? We'll talk about it in the next lecture. But now I'm going to discuss Pakistan and India because it's a very interesting case. और जो आपको अगर क्वेश्चन आएगा पाकिस्तान इंडिया न्यूक्लियर स्टैंड ऑफ के ऊपर, या इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटीज कंसर्न रिगार्डिंग पाकिस्तान न्यूक्लियर एसेट्स, तो उसमें ये आपको पता होना बड़ा जरूरी है कि व्हाट वर द फैक्टर्स व्हिच कंपेल्ड पाकिस्तान टू डेवलप न्यूक्लियर वेपन. तो जब ये नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन एफर्ट्स हो रही थी, तो उस वक्त इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी, पर्टिकुलरली यूएसए एंड यूएसएसआर एंड ऑल दीज रियलाइज्ड कि हम खाली फोर्स करके लोगों को नहीं रोक सकते, स्टेट्स को नहीं मना कर सकते कि भैया आप न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी एक्वायर ना करें. वी हैव टू कम अप विद समथिंग दैट इज मोर based on incentives. So they try to incentivize. इंसेंटिव क्या होता है कि जिसमें आप किसी को ऑफर करते हैं कोई चीज इन रिटर्न टू रेगुलेट इट और टू कंट्रोल इट और टू मेक हिम वर्क अकॉर्डिंग टू यू. जिस तरह जॉब पे होता है, आप कहते हैं कि अच्छी परफॉर्मेंस दो तो हम आपको इंसेंटिव्स देंगे. तो यहाँ पर भी दे केम अप विद अ प्रोग्राम व्हिच इज कॉल्ड एटम्स फॉर पीस. लेट मी राइट इट फॉर यू. ये एटम्स फॉर पीस प्रोग्राम अमेरिका ने दिया. उन्होंने ये कहा कि जी जो कंट्रीज ये हमारे एटम्स फॉर पीस प्रोग्राम को साइन करेंगी, इट मीन्स कि दे विल प्लेज, दे विल प्रॉमिस कि हम न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी को जो है वेपन के लिए यूज नहीं करेंगे, तो हम उनको असिस्ट करेंगे फॉर इनरिचिंग न्यूक्लियर वेपन। यहाँ पे ये चीज मैं आपको बता दूं पर्टिकुलरली नॉन साइंस स्टूडेंट्स को कि न्यूक्लियर इनरिचमेंट जो है, ये सारी इनरिचमेंट जो है बॉम्ब नहीं होती। To become a bomb, uranium has to be enriched to a certain point, which is uranium 235। आप जब यूरेनियम को इस हद तक एनरिच करते हैं तब वो बॉम्ब में कन्वर्ट होता है। उससे नीचे तक अगर आप उसको एनरिच करते हैं तो वो बॉम्ब नहीं होता, वो बेसिकली आप पीसफुल पर्पसेस के लिए यूज करते हैं। पीसफुल पर्पसेस क्या हैं? एनर्जी जनरेशन है, एग्रीकल्चर है, मेडिसिन है, ठीक है। ये सारी वो फील्ड्स हैं जिनके लिए न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी को यूज किया जाता है। तो एटम्स ऑफ पीस प्रोग्राम एनविसैज्ड और इट इमेजिन्ड कि हम इस तरह से कंट्रीज को न्यूक्लियर फैसिलिटीज ऑफर करेंगे, उन्हें हेल्प करेंगे, बट विल मेक श्योर कि वो सिर्फ पीसफुल पर्पसेस के लिए। Pakistan and India both signed this Atoms for Peace program, and as a result of which they both were given nuclear reactors, uh, so they could, develop nuclear technology for meeting the peaceful purposes. Pakistan ने तो वही किया, but India secretly embarked on the mission of developing a nuclear bomb. So in 1974, they did their first nuclear tests. Let me write it for you. Tell me what was the name of it? They termed it as Smiling Buddha. Now, when India conducted its nuclear weapon test in 1974, Pakistan, was left with no other option. Gee, Smiling Buddha on an arm there, which is very ironical. For something which was so destructive in nature, they named it as Smiling Buddha. अब आपको यहाँ पे पाकिस्तान और इंडिया की थोड़ी सी हिस्ट्री का पता होना बड़ा ज़रूरी है, और वो ये है कि सिंस पार्टीशन we have had a checkered history, and by checkered history I mean we had a history based on animosity. We had a history based on India not accepting the idea of Pakistan as an independent sovereign state. They have repeatedly tried to undermine Pakistan. Um, we have so many long standing disputes with India, border disputes, water issues, and every time India had tried to ensure that somehow, if it could, it would happily see Pakistan being a weaker state, a state it could dominate. एक बहुत important event होता है जिसको हम कहते हैं फॉल ऑफ ढाका 1971। और फॉल ऑफ ढाका में क्या हुआ था कि ईस्ट पाकिस्तान जो था, it was dismembered and was created or was turned into an independent state which we today call Bangladesh। और उसमें हमारी अपनी गलतियां अपनी जगह पर, बट जो एक रोल इंडिया ने प्ले किया वो ये था कि दे स्टार्टेड सपोर्टिंग द सेपरेटिस्ट मूवमेंट ऑफ मुक्ति बाहिनी जो कि बांग्लादेश ने बनाई हुई थी, उस वक्त ईस्ट पाकिस्तान था। They weaponize them, they provide them arms and ammunitions, as a result of which जब 1971 का हमने ऑपरेशन किया, उससे पहले जो टॉर्च लाइट ऑपरेशन हुआ, तो it turned out to be into a war because our supplies were blocked. Geographically India दरमियान में आता था, और eventually, और rest is history we know। तो इंडिया, अब जब ये 1971 की वॉर हो रही थी तो पाकिस्तान was already part of this program which is called CENTO. We were the allies of America, and we looked towards them that they will come to our help, either using their political clout. They would pressurize India from not supporting the anti-state elements in East Pakistan, but they didn't come to our help. तो पाकिस्तान को दो फैक्टर्स थे, एक ये कि इंडिया के साथ हमारा ये सारा कुछ, और हमने ये देख लिया 1971 वॉर में कि हमारी जो कन्वेंशनल वॉरफेयर थी या जो कन्वेंशनल वेपन्स थे, they were not effective against the Indian power. Secondly, we were betrayed by the international community, particularly USA. Despite being their allies, they didn't come to our help, as a result of which we had to lose Bangladesh. So Pakistan was left with no other choice. Rather, we can say Pakistan had a Hobson's choice. And what is the Hobson's choice? Which means you don't have any choice other than building a bomb of our own. So the prime minister at that time, who was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, famously said that even if we have to eat grass, we'll end up making a bomb of our own. And that's where we, did a revisit to our nuclear doctrine, which was initially limited to development of nuclear technology for solely peaceful purposes. And we decided that we needed a deterrence, because when India tested those nuclear bomb in 1974, it actually disrupted the balance of power in the region of South Asia. So we took this inevitable and hard choice, because there was no other way uh, for us to survive, and we had to have that nuclear deterrence. So that's the defense of Pakistan's developing nuclear weapons. क्योंकि दुनिया में जो डिबेट है वो ये है कि पाकिस्तान इज अ थर्ड वर्ल्ड कंट्री. We are one of those countries which have very little investment on our human development index. Um, we do not virtually invest on health and education. We have so much economic problems. We have a crisis of debts, both foreign and internal, looming over our head for many decades. And then we are a country which chose to invest on the development of a nuclear technology rather than spending it on the development of its humans. But I'll share the instances with you as we go on and talk about Pakistan India nuclear standoff. There have been so many instances where India tried to virtually overtake Pakistan, and were it not for the nuclear bomb, we might have had a full scale war with India. And given the sheer size of India, its economic resources, its military power, has very effectively since us successfully developing the nuclear bomb. एक वाक्य मैं आपके साथ शेयर करता हूँ और बाकी फिर हम अगले लेक्चर में करेंगे. In 1979 there was a revolution in Iran. और आपको पता होगा कि ईरान prior to the 1979 revolution used to be the American ally. उसके बाद फिर ईरान became from ally to American foe. अब 1979 की रेवोल्यूशन में एक इस्लामिक रेवोल्यूशन आया और वहाँ पे अयातुल्लाह खुमैनी took over from Shah of Iran. Certainly, Shah of Iran had to fled Iran, and it was a populist revolution which was supported by the masses of Iran. Out of their anger for the previous rulers' alliance with the America, the Iranian public seized American embassy in Iran. An embassy is supposed to be the territory of the respective country, but this happened, but turned out to be a blessing in disguise for Pakistan. So when they seized the American embassy, Iranian intelligence agencies came up with some documents. और वो डॉक्यूमेंट्स क्या थे जो उन्होंने पाकिस्तान के साथ शेयर किए कि Israel was planning to attack the Kahuta center of Pakistan, which was enriching uranium, to develop a nuclear bomb so that they could render Pakistan impotent from developing a nuclear bomb. Or they were being supported by India. How? जो इसराइल to Pakistan, यानी Tel Aviv to Islamabad distance है for a nuclear for a jet to fly, वो इतना ज़्यादा है कि it's a one-way mission. Any um, fighter jet carrying a nuclear weapon flying from Tel Aviv, which is the capital of Israel, to Islamabad required a refueling. तो इंडिया ने उनको सीक्रेटली अलाउ किया था कि once they bomb खुदा न खास्ता the nuclear reactor of Pakistan, and on their way back they would be allowed to enter into Indian territory, use Indian bases for refueling. Result of which, पाकिस्तान को जब ये पता लगा तो पाकिस्तान ने कहा कि ठीक है फिर if they are going to do this, we'll bomb Tel Aviv as well with our own nuclear weapon. Though we hadn't announced or pronounced our status of a nuclear weapon state, but we by then had acquired the capability of manufacturing and assembling one. So Pakistan decided कि ठीक है फिर हम भी यही करते हैं. But in our case, there was no country which was allowing us to refuel. So for us, it was essentially a one-way mission. You know, our pilots could go drop the bomb on Tel Aviv, but on their way back, they were not allowed refueling, and the only option they had was to go for crash landing rather than being captured by the enemy. So 171 pilots of Pakistan Air Force volunteered, despite knowing all too well that they will not be able to come back, or they will not be able to live after doing that. They volunteered, and once Israel learnt about it, they backed off. And then there have been so many other instances where India has tried to undermine Pakistan, has tried to attack Pakistan using their cold start doctrine. I'll share this as well with you. How many of you know what cold start doctrine is? ये जो उन्होंने प्लान किया था इसराइल ने to attack Kahuta center, it was based on this cold start doctrine. They had actually done it once with Iraq. They had destroyed the Iraq nuclear reactor using the same tactic. They enter into Iraq, showing that they flew in close formation. Dozens of jets, they flew together. तो वो radar में ऐसा आया कि एक commercial flight है, and they bombed the nuclear reactor of Iraq, and then they came back, and this is what they had planned doing with Kahuta. And using this, India also is following and believing on this cold start doctrine. Cold start doctrine क्या होती है? Cold start doctrine में आप अपनी enemy को directly confront नहीं करते, मतलब आप उसके साथ full scale war नहीं करते. आप क्या करते हैं कि आप उसके जो important strategic assets होते हैं, वो strategic assets क्या होते हैं? आपकी bases होती हैं, आपकी factories होती हैं, weapon complexes होते हैं, जैसे ordnance factory है वहाँ की, जहाँ पे हम असला बनाते हैं, या कामरा में हमारे एयरक्राफ्ट्स रिपेयर होते हैं और मैन्युफैक्चर भी होते हैं, या हमारी हैवी इंडस्ट्री कॉम्प्लेक्स है टेक्सला में, जहाँ पे हम टैंक्स वगैरह और अदर इंडस्ट्रियल रिलेटेड इक्विपमेंट बनाते हैं. हमारे डैम्स हैं तबेला और मंगला, जो कि आपकी ज़्यादा मेजर समटाइम्स the plan were already known to the Pakistani intelligence agencies, and they thwarted those plans before India could execute those plans. And I'll share the details with you. But for now, I just want to focus on this one point. So, due to all this, we've constantly lived under Indian aggression and an Indian threat of dominating Pakistan. And were it not for the nuclear weapons of Pakistan, we might have had a fourth war after Kargil. And the only reason we haven't fought any war is because we've achieved nuclear deterrence. And then there is another thing which is MAD, which is mutually assured destruction. India knows all too well that Pakistan has the capability of replying back in case of a full war with its nuclear weapons, and those nuclear weapons are capable of creating mayhem in India. But that being said, you also should be aware of the fact that we share somewhat 1600 kilometer border with India on the eastern side. And whether the nukes are used by Pakistan or India, the destruction is going to be mutually, damaging to both the countries, owing to our proximity of land and etc. So this is the whole reason for Pakistan acquiring nuclear weapons, and it became a sort of security imperative. Let me write it this word for you. So ours was a genuine security concern, and India's hegemonic designs, they pushed Pakistan, which had initially started developing nuclear technology, or acquired nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, but ended up developing nuclear bombs. All right. So, any questions so far? Any questions? No, we haven't. We haven't. I'm coming to NPT, and now we're going to discuss the non-proliferation regime. All right. सो ये एक बैकड्रॉप था जिसमें आपको ये बताना ज़रूरी था कि वाई देयर वाज an arms race which started after or during the Cold War, and why Pakistan and India developed nuclear bombs, particularly what were the factors which compelled Pakistan to develop a nuclear bomb of its own. Now we'll focus on Pakistan and the non-proliferation regime. So as I said earlier, when we say the non-proliferation regime, we are basically referring to all those treaties, institutions, laws which have been designed to contain and disarm nuclear states from spreading this technology and eventually giving up on their own nuclear weapons. So they collectively are called the non-proliferation regime. It includes the institutions and it also includes the bodies. So when we say institutions, we have CTBT, we have FMCT, we have NPT, we have Outer Space TT, we have INT, and then we have institutions such as IAEA, which stands for, maybe I'll explain it to you. I'll explain it to you. Just give me a minute. Let me write it down and then I'll explain it. Okay. Then we have NSG, which is Nuclear Suppliers Group, and IAEA stands for International Atomic Energy Agency. Let me write the full form for you. So, जब हम नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन रिजीम का वर्ड यूज करते हैं तो हम इन सब चीज़ों की बात कर रहे होते हैं, हम उन सारी ट्रीटीज की बात कर रहे होते हैं. नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन ट्रीटी जो 1968-69 में आई, and then it came into effect in 1971. Word itself explains कि नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन की बात करती है. CTBT कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव टेस्ट बैंड ट्रीटी है जो कि न्यूक्लियर एक्सप्लोजिव्स या न्यूक्लियर एक्सप्लोजन टेस्ट जो होते हैं उनको रोकने के लिए बनाई गई. FMCT जो थी वो फिजन मटेरियल कट ऑफ ट्रीटी थी, क्या फिजन मटेरियल की जो उसको रोकने के लिए. पार्शियल टेस्ट बैंड ट्रीटी थी, आउटर स्पेस ट्रीटी थी. अब न्यूक्लियर सप्लायर्स ग्रुप क्या करता है कि वो जो न्यूक्लियर मटेरियल रेलेवेंट सप्लाई है उसको देखता है. ये 1975 में बना and it was established in response of India's nuclear tests. क्योंकि इंडिया, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया कि वो सीक्रेटली न्यूक्लियर मटेरियल जो है उसको एक्सपोर्ट कर रहा था फ्रॉम अदर कंट्रीज, और they were not using it for peaceful purposes, rather they were making a bomb of their own. तो फिर दुनिया को ये लगा कि हमें इस जो न्यूक्लियर मटेरियल है जिसको हम हाईली एनरिच्ड यूरेनियम या प्लूटोनियम जो है, दो यूज होते हैं इंटरचेंजेबली,
जो इसका ट्रांसपोर्टेशन है हमें उसको भी रेगुलराइज करने की ज़रूरत है। हमें ये देखने की ज़रूरत है कि ये जो यूरेनियम इंपोर्ट या एक्सपोर्ट किया जा रहा है, ये प्लूटोनियम इंपोर्ट या एक्सपोर्ट किया जा रहा है, ये किस पर्पसेस के लिए यूज़ हो रहा है। IAEA जो है उसका मैंडेट काफ़ी लार्ज है, as the word itself says, it's an international atomic energy agency. So all the energy which is being produced using nuclear reactors, enrichment of uranium और plutonium, वो उसको देखता है कि ये जो energy है, is it used for the peaceful purposes or is it being used for developing a bomb? Treaties जो हैं वो countries को on board लेती हैं कि वो जो है वो proliferation ना कर सके। So ये सारी चीज़ें जो collectively हैं, all the treaties as well as the institutions that I've just mentioned, they collectively refer to the non-proliferation regime. इनमें से कुछ treaties जो हैं वो इतनी effective नहीं हैं। जो important इनमें सबसे important treaty है वो NPT है, non-proliferation treaty, और रोल ऑफ एनएसजी है और IAEA। तो जब हम देखेंगे आगे जाके डिटेल से पढ़ेंगे कि नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन रिजीम का फेलियर क्या था, तो फिर उसमें हम इन ट्रीटीज का डिस्कस करेंगे कि ये क्यों फेल हुई, what were the factors, were there any structural or inherent flaws in the treaties, was it the non-seriousness of the international community, or was it the politics of global powers, or was it the discriminatory attitude adopted in these treaties towards some states, was it the favorable treatment given to some countries। जैसे भी हम NSG की बात कर रहे थे, न्यूक्लियर सप्लायर्स ग्रुप, मैंने आपको बताया कि इंडिया की वजह से एक ग्रुप बनाया गया, एंड द आयरनी ऑफ दिस होल थिंग इज कि 2016 में इंडिया ने NSG की मेंबरशिप के लिए अप्लाई किया, और इनिशियली तो रेजिस्टेंस इंडिया को आई फ्रॉम वेरियस कंट्रीज, बट USA continuously supported India's bid to become the member of NSC. ठीक है, despite the fact that India was the one whose violation led to the creation of NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group, और इंडिया को ही मेंबरशिप देने जा रहे हैं। तो जो इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स है उसमें ये चीज़ मैटर नहीं करती कि आप एज अ स्टेट मोरालिटी नहीं होती, वहाँ पे होता है कन्वर्जेंस ऑफ इंटरेस्ट। ठीक है,
आपको एक चीज पता होना चाहिए कि इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में या इंटरनेशनल लॉ जो एग्जिस्ट करता है ये वॉलंटरी है, ये बाइंडिंग नहीं है। आप सिग्नेटरी एज ए कंट्री, एज ए स्टेट, आप अगर किसी लॉ पर, किसी ट्रीटी पर साइन करते हैं तो दिस इज अ वॉलंटरी थिंग। आप वॉलंटियर करते हैं आउट ऑफ मे बी डिप्लोमेटिक प्रेशर और कन्वर्जेंस ऑफ इंटरेस्ट और वट एवर यू वॉन्ट टू कॉल इट, बट वो आप पे बाइंडिंग नहीं होता। ये जरूरी नहीं है कि अगर एक ट्रीटी एग्जिस्ट करती है तो हर कंट्री ने उसको साइन करना ही करना है। कंट्रीज में और मे नॉट, ठीक है। और सिग्नेटरी होना और उसको रेटिफाई करना, ये दो बड़ी डिफरेंट चीजें हैं। ये बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट है जो आपको बाकी सब्जेक्ट्स में भी हेल्प करेगा कि सिग्नेचर कर लेने से आप जरूरी नहीं है कि यू हैव अग्रीड टू अबाइड बाय दैट लॉ और ट्रीटी और वट एवर इट इज, इट हैज टू बी रेटिफाइड। और हर कंट्री की रेटिफिकेशन का अपना एक प्रोसेस है। जैसे मैं आपको अमेरिका की एग्जांपल देता हूँ। अमेरिका में कहा यह जाता है कि दुनिया में जो सबसे पावरफुल पॉलिटिकल ऑफिस है वो अमेरिकन प्रेसिडेंट का है। व्हाई? बिकॉज ही हैपेंस टू बी बोथ द हेड ऑफ द स्टेट एंड हेड ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट। अब डिफरेंस क्या है? हेड ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट वो होता है जो एग्जीक्यूटिव होता है, और हेड ऑफ द स्टेट जो होता है वो एग्जीक्यूटिव नहीं होता। बट अमेरिका इज अ प्रेसिडेंशियल सिस्टम, वहां पे जो डेमोक्रेटिक सिस्टम इस वक्त चल रहा है वो प्रेसिडेंशियल है, which means the president is both the head of the state as well as head of the government. हमारे केस में different है, we have the prime minister as head of the government, but head of the state is supposed to be the president, which is more of a ceremonious role, but even then it has certain powers. But despite the fact that American president happens to be the most powerful man politically, a lot of his decisions need the endorsement of uh, the the Congress, the American Congress, or foreign policy is one such. तो अगर अमेरिकन प्रेसिडेंट कोई डिसीजन लेता है किसी इंटरनेशनल प्लेटफॉर्म पर रिगार्डिंग एनीथिंग, इट हैज टू बी इंडोर्स्ड बाय द कांग्रेस, जिसको हम रेटिफिकेशन कहते हैं. अगर कांग्रेस इंडोर्स नहीं करेगी तो वो उस डिसीजन की फिर वैल्यू नहीं रहेगी. एंड दिस एक्सप्लेन्स कि व्हाई जब लीग ऑफ नेशंस बनी प्रायर टू यूनाइटेड नेशंस, अमेरिका वाज द फाउंडिंग मेंबर, वन ऑफ द फाउंडिंग मेंबर्स ऑफ लीग ऑफ नेशंस, जो वर्ल्ड वॉर 1 के बाद बनाई थी, जस्ट लाइक यूएनओ. But America never joined it. Why? Because when the president came back after signing that treaty, the Congress never allowed America, or never endorsed the decision of the president. Similarly, uh, a lot of treaties which were signed by the countries but not being ratified by them is because their internal politics did not allow them. CTBT is one such case in point. And then sometimes the change of regime also brings a change in the attitude of a country towards a certain treaty. आपने भी देखा होगा कि शायद न्यूज में आपने बहुत सारे लोगों ने पढ़ा होगा कि ईरान के साथ फाइनली अमेरिका had a deal as far as their nuclear program was concerned during the era of Barack Obama, who is the predecessor of the current president, Donald Trump. But when Donald Trump came into power, he thrashed that treaty out. Similarly, on Kyoto Protocol, America backed off. So is the case with FMCT. So treaties जो हैं, ये voluntarily होता है एक country का कि वो treaty को join करे या ना करे. अब हम बात करते हैं इन treaties की one by one, लेकिन इसमें सबसे important जो treaties हैं वो NPT है, which stands for Non-Proliferation Treaty. ठीक है जी. ये ट्रीटी 1968 में की गई थी. इसके दो बड़े इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्टूर्स हैं, ये नोट्स में भी आपको मिल जाएंगे, बट नाउ दैट इज फॉर योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग ओनली. ठीक है. एक क्या था? टू contain proliferation. It means to stop the countries from spreading the nuclear technology from one state to another, and also to contain them from acquiring or developing new nuclear weapons, those states who already had the nuclear technology. Second, it इनविसाज का मतलब होता है कि जब आप कुछ इमेजिन करते हैं कि मतलब ये काम होगा अगर मैं ऐसे करूं. सो इट इनविसाज्ड द डीवेपनाइजेशन ऑफ ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्टिंग न्यूक्लियर वेपन स्टेट्स. ये दो इसके प्राइम ऑब्जेक्टिव्स थे कि प्रोलिफरेशन को रोकना है, यानी स्टेट्स को अलाउ नहीं करना कि वो अपने वेपन्स को, सिस्टम्स को ट्रांसफ़र करें टू अदर स्टेट्स. उनको इस चीज़ से भी रोकना है कि वो न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स फर्दर डेवलप ना करें अगर उन्होंने ऑलरेडी एक्वायर कर लिए. और फिर जिन स्टेट्स ने एक्वायर किए हुए हैं उनको डीवेपनाइज करना है, यानी उनको परसू करना है टू गिव अप द न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्टिंग. So it aimed at total elimination of nuclearization or nuclear arms race. But problem क्या था? Problem ये था कि the treaty itself had certain flaws. दो flaw मैं आपके साथ यहाँ पे discuss करूँगा. Number one, that it recognized all those states who had acquired nuclear weapons prior to 1968. ठीक है, जिसमें आपकी यूएसएसआर, यूएसए, यूके, फ्रांस और चाइना आ जाती हैं. सो इट सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रोवाइडेड देम लेजिटिमेसी कि ठीक है ये तो न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स स्टेट हैं लेकिन इसके बाद कोई नहीं होगा. सेकेंडली, उस ट्रीटी में फ्लॉ ये था कि उन्होंने कहा कि कोई भी कंट्री किसी वक्त भी इस ट्रीटी को छोड़ सकती है. तो अभी दोनों में आपको एग्जांपल्स देके बताऊंगा कि ये फ्लॉ कैसे है? देखिए, लॉ या किसी भी ट्रीटी का ये याद रखिए कि उसका जो इफेक्टिवनेस है वो डिपेंड कर रही होती है कि वो कितनी जो है वो अनबायस्ड है और कितनी एपॉलिटिकल है। अगर उसमें डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होगी, कुछ स्टेट्स को फेवरेबल स्टेटस दिया जाएगा, तो वो कभी भी उसको बाकी स्टेट्स अडॉप्ट नहीं। पाकिस्तान में लोग ट्रैफिक को क्यों फॉलो नहीं करते? आप बाहर जाएं तो देखें लोग ट्रैफिक को फॉलो कर रहे होते हैं, हम पाकिस्तानी कर रहे होते हैं या नहीं कर रहे होते, या फॉर दैट मैटर हम किसी भी लॉ को फॉलो नहीं करते। उसकी रीजन है, उसकी रीजन ये है कि आवर लॉ व्हेन इट कम्स टू इट्स इम्प्लीमेंटेशन इज वेरी डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी इन नेचर। पाकिस्तान में कहा जाता है यू टेल मी द पर्सन एंड आई टेल यू द लॉ। आवर लॉ इज पर्सन स्पेसिफिक। तो जब हम इशारे पे खड़े होते हैं और आप देखते हैं कि जी एक हूटर वाली गाड़ी तेजी से निकल गई और आप बेचारे इशारे पे खड़े रह गए, ये एक बड़ी लैंड क्रूजर या प्राडो जो है वो तेजी से निकल गई और आप खड़े रह गए, तो फिर आपको जहां मौका मिलता है आप भी इशारा तोड़ने की कोशिश करते हैं। आप देखते हैं कि यार टैक्स, बाकी दुनिया अमीर लोग टैक्स अवेड कर रहे हैं और आपसे टैक्स लिया जा रहा है, तो आप भी टैक्स अवेड करते हैं। ठीक है, तो इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी में भी जब लॉ इस तरह का हो जो कि कुछ पावरफुल स्टेट्स को फेवरेबल स्टेटस दे या उनके साथ पॉलिसी ऑफ अपीजमेंट को अडॉप्ट करे, तो फिर जो स्मॉलर स्टेट्स हैं वो उस लॉ को अबाइड नहीं करती, वो उसको फॉलो नहीं करती, वो उसके सिग्नेटरी हो के भी उस पर उस तरह से इम्प्लीमेंटेशन नहीं होती। हम इसको कहते हैं लूज इम्प्लीमेंटेशन। यूज द टर्म लूज इम्प्लीमेंटेशन। वो एक कोटेशन भी है, थॉमस हॉब्स ने कहा था कि एन अनजस्ट लॉ इज नो लॉ। तो लॉ ही अगर उसमें जस्टिस का कॉन्सेप्ट है लॉ के पीछे कि इट यूनिफॉर्मली इज एप्लीकेबल टू एवरीवन। तो एनपीटी में जब हम ये देखते हैं कि आप 5 स्टेट्स को अलाउ कर रहे हैं टू कैरी ऑन विद द स्टेटस ऑफ न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स और बाकी स्टेट्स को आप रोकें, दिस इन इटसेल्फ इज वेरी डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी नेचर। दूसरा उसका जो ऑब्वियस फ्लॉ था वो ये था कि इट अलाउड द स्टेट्स कि आप किसी वक्त भी एनपीटी को छोड़ सकते हैं, जो नॉर्थ कोरिया ने किया। नॉर्थ कोरिया वाज इनिशियली सिग्नेटरी टू एनपीटी बट देन दे गिव अप एंड दे स्टार्टेड एम्बार्किंग ऑन द न्यूक्लियर ड्राइव। और बाकी कंट्रीज लाइक पाकिस्तान, इंडिया, they didn't sign the treaty because उन्होंने कहा जी हम पहले ये जो बड़ी स्टेट्स हैं इनसे तो वेपन लेके दिखाएं ना, इनसे तो इनको तो डी वेपनाइज करें एज फार एज their nuclear weapon status is concerned. So these were two prime reasons for NPT to fail or to not become a very effective treaty. ठीक है, ये एक है। लेकिन यहाँ पर एक इंपॉर्टेंट चीज मैं आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहूंगा कि इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटीज जो कि मल्टीलैटरल थी, व्हेन आई यूज द वर्ड मल्टीलैटरल, इसका मतलब ये कि इसमें मल्टी पार्टीज इन्वॉल्व है, यानी मल्टी स्टेट्स इन्वॉल्व है, वो इतनी इफेक्टिव नहीं थी। लेकिन बायलैटरल ट्रीटीज हैव बीन इफेक्टिव, एंड बायलैटरल आई मीन बाय से आप याद रखें व्हेन देयर आर टू पार्टीज। जो कोल्ड वॉर के एंड में यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स और यूएसएसआर के दरमियान में ट्रीटीज साइन हुई जिनको सॉल्ट 1 और सॉल्ट 2 कहते हैं, which aimed at the reduction of nuclear weapons, वो काफी सक्सेसफुल नहीं, because resultantly rather than prior to those treaties, USA and USSR were both developing more and more nuclear weapons, but then they started reducing down their nuclear stockpiles. तो इससे हमें एक चीज पता लगती है कि ट्रीटी इफेक्टिव तब होती है जब उस पे आप म्यूचुअल एग्रीमेंट ले आते हैं। कंसेंसस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। तो ये मैंने एग्जांपल इसलिए दी है कि जब क्योंकि दो लोगों में कंसेंसस डेवलप करना या दो स्टेट्स में कंसेंसस डेवलप करना आसान होता है। सो कंसेंसस, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि जो इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटीज हैं उनमें आप कंसेंसस डेवलप नहीं कर सकते। लेकिन अगर ना हो, लैक ऑफ इट लीड्स to the treaty becoming ineffective, treaty becoming politicized, and treaty becoming controversial. And this is exactly what has happened with all the treaties, multilateral treaties, including NPT, including CTBT, including FMCT, including partial test ban treaty, including the outer space treaty that they were the international community, particularly the superpowers or the powerful states, were not able to develop consensus, which created a sort of insecurity among the smaller states. You know, अगर आपका किसी से लड़ाई हो जाए, imagine you have a bout or a fight with your neighbor. Now your neighbor happens to be a very strong guy. He has more power than you. और वो आपको कहे कि ठीक है लड़ाई तो है, बट पहले आप अपना वेपन गिव अप करें, फिर मैं अपना। आप कहेंगे कि यार ये पहले ही पावरफुल है, वेपन भी ये रख रहा है और मुझसे डिमांड कर रहा है कि अपना वेपन गिव अप कर दो, रिलिंक्विश कर दो, तो आप तो नहीं करेंगे। तो यही कंडीशन यहाँ पे भी है। स्मॉलर स्टेट्स को ये है, वीकर स्टेट के अमेरिका कन्वेंशनली भी स्ट्रांग है, कन्वेंशनल वॉरफेयर में भी आगे हैं, टेक्नोलॉजिकली भी वो आगे हैं, न्यूक्लियर वेपन भी उनके पास है, और इसके बावजूद दे डोंट वांट टू गिव अप on their nuclear arms status, and they expect the smaller states to do it. The smaller states would never do it, owing to their own security demands and security implications, and the larger sense of insecurity that prevails. And why it prevails, I told you that the world largely is anarchic. Somebody mentioned when I was talking about anarchy in the beginning कि जी यूएनओ का रोल है। देखें, you have to understand one thing. I've been telling time and again, but let me reiterate it. कि international community और international platforms, उनके जो laws हैं या उनकी resolution हैं, वो यूनानिमसली भी पास हो जाए, तो वो कंट्री अगर उसको फॉलो करे या ना करे, ये उसके ऊपर। आपके पास एग्जांपल है 1948 में, जब इंडिया illegally occupied Kashmir, United Nations passed two resolutions. One in 1948, the other one was, I think, in either in 51 or 52. Both were unanimously passed. It means all those countries who were in attendance, they favored the resolution and they called for the plebiscite in Kashmir. And now we are sitting in 2020, and 70 years have been passed since then. And India, rather than conducting or abiding by those resolutions, it has done quite the opposite. It continues to, occupy Kashmir Valley illegally and continues to do repression to the Kashmiri people. This should explain that any international treaty, law, or resolution, whatever that is being done by United Nations, is not mandatory. States are not supposed to abide by it. And then there is a lot of international politics surrounding the decisions which are taken by the United Nations. जो आपकी यूएन की सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल है, जो उसके 5 परमानेंट मेंबर्स हैं, what do? They try to support the states which are allied to them. Russia would always support China and its allies, as is the case with Iran. America would do the opposite by supporting the Israel. So anything that is run by the larger community, which is the United Nations General Assembly, where every country has a voice and a vote, it eventually lands into United Nations Security Council. It's the council which takes the ultimate decision, and that's where it gets the victim of larger politics. America, despite all what India has done so far, has turned a blind eye towards the atrocities which are being committed in Kashmir and in in Palestine. But on the contrary, if something happens which doesn't suit them, they immediately take international community on board. We have the case of East Timor, where there was a small uprising by the Christian community, and they wanted to form a state of their own. And East Timor was largely a Muslim-ruled country. And within days, a small independent Christian state was carved out of it. We have the case of 9/11. Right after that, they embarked on their international campaign of eliminating terrorism, and they brought everybody under their foil because they used United Nations for doing that. But they haven't done anything so far when it comes to the plight of Kashmiris and Palestinians. So this explains that international laws and treaties are subject to the national interests of the big power, big and powerful states. If there is a convergence of international their own interest, they might voice for it, they might support it. But if there is a divergence of interest or their own allies are involved, they would know what's going on in Kashmir. There are, as we speak now, it's nearly 300 plus days since the lockdown on Kashmir, in the wake of revocation of Article 370, and how Kashmiris are brutalized every day, how they are being treated. Um, but the world community largely has remained silent on it. Why? Because India happens to offer economic incentives, given its large economic market, given job potential it has uh, for these countries. So, in the absence of any effective government or authority which could sort of arbitrate among the states, smaller states will not give up their arms or nuclear status or their race for nuclear armament as long as the powerful states take the lead by relinquishing their nuclear weapons. But the reports, the studies, they point contrary to that. There has been reduction of quantity in nuclear weapons, but qualitatively, even after the Cold War, and despite agreeing to reduce down in the number of the nuclear stockpiles, nuclear armed states have continued to develop more technology, have continued to advance in making their existing nuclear weapons more sophisticated, more lethal, and more modernized. So, quantitatively, there has been a reduction, but qualitatively, the proliferation has continued by these states. So, when you're not abiding by a certain law, how do you expect others to do it? So, if the powerful states, despite having all other technological, industrial, economic, and military and conventional power to their disposal, if they continue to invest in their nuclear stockpiles, the arms race will always continue. All right, all right, guys. I think it's 8:59.